Welcome to Block and Build, a podcast from Convergence Magazine. I'm your host and the publisher of Convergence, Hayden Mock. On this show, we're building a roadmap for the movement that's working to block the impacts of rising authoritarianism while building the strength and resilience of the broad front that we need to win. Before we get started, I just want to say thanks. This is our last new episode of 2025, and I'm glad that you've made the time to join us week after week for this show. It's been one heck of a year, and if you've enjoyed what you've heard, consider giving us a rating and review on your podcast app. It helps us find new listeners, and it's a great gift to our team to know what you think about the program. This week on the show, I got to talk to the editors of a new anthology called We Will Rise Again, Karen Lord, Analee Newitz, and Malka Older. The book is a collection of speculative stories and essays on protest, resistance, and hope, which champions realistic, progressive social change using the speculative stories of writers from around the world. To assemble the book, they put writers, organizers, scholars, and others in conversation with one another to dive deep on the messy work of making change. But first, these headlines. On Wednesday, in a joint operation by the FBI, Coast Guard, and Department of Homeland Security, an oil tanker was seized in the Caribbean carrying Venezuelan oil headed for Cuba, which, by the way, is currently in the midst of an energy crisis. This is a clear escalation of tensions yet again, this time under the guise of fighting terrorism. The tanker had previously transported oil from countries on the United States sanctions list, including Iran, which is the supposed justification for targeting this ship in particular, according to the warrant issued a couple of weeks ago. This is some pretty wild U.S. militarism Mad Libs, using this specific vessel's history carrying sanctioned oil while it's close to the shores of a country the Trump administration is playing chicken with on its way to a country that we've been squeezing with economic sanctions for nearly 3/4 of a century, largely for ideological reasons. In a lot of ways, I think people don't find this as troubling as it should be, in large part because we've been doing this kind of thing for decades, because we're doing it with the fig leaf of having a judicial warrant. Then on Thursday, the Indiana State Senate voted down a bill to redraw their state's congressional districts to favor Republicans. This bill's failure is a major blow to the assumed obedience of all Republicans to Trump and his MAGA agenda, as he made threats to primary legislators who did not vote for the bill, and even sent J.D. Vance to the state twice to whip up support for the bill. If passed, the law would have gerrymandered the state to pick up 2 Republican seats, eliminating all Democratic members of the Indiana House delegation. There's a few things we can glean from this rebuttal of Trump, the biggest probably being that the MAGA movement has even more fissures than we've been pointing out on this show over and over. GOP lawmakers in Indiana are going on record saying that they don't like the very non-conservative vibes of the chief executive of the federal government telling states exactly what laws to pass. And honestly, they're kind of brave for doing so. Some of them have been taking some serious flack for it, including harassment, swatting. It signals a cooling in the escalation that's been playing out across the country. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker had previously indicated that he'd seek partisan gerrymandering if Indiana passed theirs. Meanwhile, Trump has tried to pretend that this isn't the basis of their entire midterm electoral strategy, claiming shortly after the bill's failure, quote, "I wasn't working on it very hard," and, quote, "I wasn't very much involved." You know, it's like, whatever. Meanwhile, Paramount's Skydance is attempting a $108 billion takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery in response to the announcement by Netflix that they were going to acquire the company last week. Paramount Skydance is owned by David Ellison, a failed filmmaker who was essentially gifted the company by his billionaire father, Larry Ellison. The names of the companies should give you a hint at how bad things are getting in the media world. These entertainment conglomerates are already the result of decades of mergers and risk consolidating more of art and entertainment into smaller and smaller numbers of Nepo baby hands. Currently, only 6 companies own almost all the media outlets in the United States, compared to 50 companies in the 1980s. The purchase would represent one of the largest such acquisitions in U.S. history and would cost more than the GDP of any one of the majority of countries on Earth.
Hi, this is Josh Elstro, the senior multimedia producer here at Convergence Magazine. That means I have the privilege of working on all the audio and video projects that you see coming from Convergence day in and day out. I hope you'll consider becoming a member of Convergence. We're a small independent operation and rely heavily on our readers and listeners just like you to support this work. You can become a member at convergencemag.com/donate. You'll find a direct link to that in the show notes, of course. Monthly and annual memberships start at just $10 a month, or you can even make a one-time donation. Any amount helps build a better independent media ecosystem, one that supports people's movements while opposing fascism. But at $10 monthly and above, you get access to exclusive subscriber content and events. If you can't afford anything right now, don't worry, our shows and print content are always going to be free for you to enjoy. You could still help by leaving a podcast review following on Instagram, or even subscribing to our YouTube. Thanks for listening.
My guests this week are the editors of the new book, We Will Rise Again, a collection of speculative stories and essays on protest, resistance, and hope. The collection champions realistic, progressive social change, featuring imaginative pieces from writers including N.K. Jemisin, Charlie Jane Anders, and many more leading contemporary writers of speculative and science fiction. As part of the genesis of the book, they hosted a conference bringing fiction authors, organizers, and scholars of social movements into conversation, exploring the real, messy ways movements build people power and the very human reasons we engage in the difficult work of transformation. I talked with all three of the book's co-editors earlier this week about organizing, speculative fiction, and more. Have a listen. I'd like to start by taking just a second to introduce each of my guests who is an editor of We Will Rise Again. First, we are joined by Karen Lord. She is the author of Redemption in Indigo, which won the 2011 William L. Crawford Award and the 2012 Kitschies Golden Tentacle for Best Debut, and was nominated for the 2011 World Fantasy Award for Best Novel. She's also the author and editor of several other novels and collections. Karen, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Next, we are joined by Analee Newitz. They are the author of several books, including Automatic Noodle, which was an instant USA Today bestseller, The Terraformers, which was nominated for the Nebula Award, and more. They are also a science journalist, publishing a monthly column in New Scientist magazine. Analee, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, we are also joined by Malka Older. She is the executive director of Global Voices, a community of journalists, editors, translators, and activists providing community journalism from all over the world and advocating for indigenous and minority languages, media literacy, digital rights, and online freedom of expression. Her science fiction political thriller, Infomocracy, was named among the best books of 2016 by Kirkus, The Washington Post, and Book Riot. Malka, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
That's such a good, this is a great, I love it when I get to read people's bios and it's like people are hyping each other up in the in the chat. Well, let's talk a little bit about We Will Rise Again. It's a bit of an unusual format, and I'm really interested in hearing more about where this combination of speculative fiction, but then also these very rich conversations about the world we live in now, came from. How did you come to the format, and what was the editorial process like? Because I'm sure it's a little different than other stuff that you all have worked on. Karen, maybe you can start us off.
Well, I do want to say, first of all, that I don't even quite recall at what point we decided that we had to be including a lot of the nonfiction. But because we wanted the anthology to be grounded in reality, one of the first things that we did was we had a planned virtual conference where writers could listen to some of the organizers and the activists and so on, and just sort of discuss various themes. And the conference itself produced such excellent conversations and interviews that we were like, we can't waste this material. So that was one good reason, I think, for us deciding that the format had to be a little different. And as for the editorial process, I have to say one of the best things about doing this project with these two colleagues of mine is that this is really an anthology that has something for everybody. Because when we split up our editing duties, when we split up the manuscripts, we were able to choose the stories that most resonated with us. And I don't want to quite call them favorites because you can look at a story and think to yourself, wow, that's an amazing story. But then you can look at another story and think, no, this one actually resonates more deeply with me. And I can really talk to the author about what they want to say and how to bring that out. So I do want to make it clear that I'm not talking about which ones we thought were best. So that I think that was a really enjoyable thing for me. First of all, that you didn't have to edit all those stories. And secondly, that you could really just indulge yourself by choosing the ones that you were going to enjoy the most.
Malka, I'd like to hear a little bit about the editorial process from you and what your experience was putting this together.
Yeah, I mean, I was just so happy when Karen and Analee came to me with the idea for this anthology because, I mean, first of all, I love working with both of them, and I'm such an admirer of their work. And also the idea for it is just, it's so important and so needed. And I think Analee had the thought that it would be a bit like some of the projects that have been done where they pair up speculative fiction writers with astrophysicists or other scientists, but around collective action. And as a sociologist myself, I definitely feel like the so-called soft sciences are much less, I mean, I think they're actually really well represented in speculative fiction. We just don't talk about it as much. And so to be really explicit about that and say, that organizing and activism and building collective action is a skill that people have and that they work for and that they study, and that's something that we can learn from and that we should be learning from to represent in a realistic speculative way, in a rigorous way, even as we use our imagination to push the boundaries on it. That was so exciting to me.
Yeah, no, that's really rad. As somebody who reads a lot of science fiction, I feel like there is this real prominent preoccupation with the hard sciences, and like I don't understand why it is that way. Like there are disciplines that people are drawing from, so that resonates for sure. Analee, is there anything you'd like to add about the editorial process?
I just wanted to reiterate that I think part of the joy and importance of this project really was taking seriously that we can write realistic social movements, and that there is a way to write about social movements that deviates from, I think, what we typically think of as like the Wizard of Oz scenario, where you like defeat the bad guy and then everybody sings and the sun comes out. And it's just so remarkable that in science fiction, you'll have tons of fans just lose their shit when somebody writes a story where faster than light doesn't work the way it should work. But nobody loses their shit when people write these depictions of social movements that are so fantastical that they're just unhelpful. They don't allow us to imagine how we might fit into such a social movement, because they're just based on nothing.
Well, I'm interested in hearing about this virtual conference that you all put on in 2022 as the sort of like grounding for that realism. How did that come about? Like, who was invited? Like, I kind of want to know everything, because it sounds like such a like formative experience for the book, and also in a lot of ways for like where these stories came from.
I think we're going to cross-talk a lot, so just
yeah, no, totally. Here for it.
I just got to say that for me, the big thrill was we had time zones. Okay, it was really a case of we wanted a virtual conference that everybody around the world could attend, because we had writers as far away as India and Malaysia. Mm-hmm. We had people who were on the West Coast. We didn't have anyone in Hawaii, did we? Just checking. No. Oh, no, okay. Just wanted to see how far that extent went. So we really had to make sure that it was accessible to everyone. And that was a thrill for me when I was trying to help put the schedule together.
It was, first of all, I can't believe that was 2022.
Let's not go there.
It's not. This was a labor of love, and it took years. But it was such an amazing conference. And it was like, and when we say conference, like, let's be clear that this was, we had a little bit of support from Arizona State University Center for Science and the Imagination, which has done a lot of these anthologies before, pairing scientists with writers. So they were very excited about this. And so, they gave us some facilities with their Zoom, but this was literally like a bunch of Zoom calls. And what made it special was the people who came, and having a consciousness that we were doing it for people outside of the US and Europe, and having those time zones accessible and thinking about those aspects. But, we invited some just amazing activists and then the writers. I mean, the questions that they were putting to, it was just, this is why. So it was an amazing thing, but we didn't have the idea that would become part of the book until it happened. And we're like, wait, this is so good. We don't want to lose this. We want to make sure it's available. And just did the transcribing and went for it, because, it was cool.
Yeah, and I should say that the very first kind of seed of this book came out of a meeting that I had with Andrea Dellendorf, who came to the conference. She's a labor organizer. She's done a lot of incredible stuff. And right now she's trying to kick Amazon's ass, which I appreciate. And she said to me, we were talking about, how do you reimagine the labor movement, basically? This is like back in 2021. And she was like, we need science fiction. Like, why isn't there an anthology that like teaches people how to build power as collectives? Because so much science fiction is focused on like the rugged individual, like the Martian is a great model of that, right? Like one guy with his potatoes on Mars. And it's like, that's not how the world works, guys, like at all.
No.
And
It's not even how science works. Like when you do science, you're working in
no,
teams.
you're sciencing the shit out of that. The thing that's so funny about The Martian is, of course, it was a collaboratively written book. Like he wrote that on the internet with all kinds of feedback from scientists and experts, which was part of what made it so great. But so, Andrea came to the conference. We had L.A. Kaufman, who is an amazing movement designer. Like she thinks about the aesthetics of collective action as well as the effectiveness of it, or how those two things go together. We had a great conversation with Kendra Pierre-Lewis, who is a journalist who writes about the environment. And it was so fun to see and hear the writers asking these kind of procedural questions, like, how do you actually do the journalism? Like, how do you find people? What does that look like? What does a meeting look like when you have a meeting of activists together? And that's why so many of these stories deal with process. Like, there's a lot of meetings in this book. There's a lot of people just getting together and making decisions. And that's the part that often
I just need to crosstalk slightly. A lot of meetings, they're not dry. They're often attended by food.
Yes.
Yeah.
And writers and food, it's always a marvelous thing because we like to describe our food. Sorry, go ahead, Analee.
No, that's all I was trying to say is that I think we kind of, because we talk to the activists, we learn about the nitty gritty stuff, like not just the moment where like, we're in the streets, we've got the people, we've got the signs. It's like, and that took 2 years of people meeting, eating yummy samosas together and like figuring stuff out,
It's texture too. It's like, because what we want, when we're learning something from fiction, we want to have that sense of like how it feels to do it, not just shiny, glossy surface. Oh yeah, we were all in the streets together and it was amazing. And there was this, medley of protest songs going on in the background as we skipped anything that was not fun or
it was
boring.
Cinematic.
Yeah. And, so to have really people thinking about, okay, what are the boring parts of this and how do I depict that? What are the, not so boring, but like challenging in different ways that aren't visual, or what are the other issues? And then like those details about like, what is the place like? What does it feel like? What do people wear? And of course that can change in the speculative, but to have today's vision of it to start with is so helpful.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you say this because there were times when I was reading some stories and it really made me think about David Graeber's really classic ethnography of direct action called Direct Action. That was like this sort of like, and like he's a participant ethnographer, right? So he's like writing about these protests against, I forget which globalization, like global economy governing body it is in Montreal in like the late 2010s or the early 2010s, I want to say. But like that sort of same, like, this is what we talked about. Like, this is like how we figured out where to go, what to do. And there's so much of that like, I feel like a lot of the stories cover some of that material in ways that are like, if you're not going to pick up this 500-page David Graeber book, like maybe you are going to read these stories. And, Malka, I was also thinking about Aversion in particular, like your story in it about this sort of like internal conflict about strategy that is like, I can't tell you how much of my life has been spent like in internal conflict within organizations, dealing with these deep strategic questions that are like, they come up again and again because they are deeply relevant to the world that we live in. And I don't know, I appreciated that so much because I was like, wow, this feels like real life.
I am so happy to hear that. And like, as someone who's also spent a lot of time in organizations dealing with internal organizational conflicts and also like personalities and, how do you get along with someone that you agree with on this issue, but nothing else, or they just rub you the wrong way, but you still need to work together to get this done. How do you convince people when something is like not quite right and it needs to be right? And maybe you're wrong. Maybe it doesn't need to be right. And that's a you thing. And like, there's all of this. So, I said, I'm a sociologist and my degree is actually from a school called the Center for the Sociology of Organizations. So like, this is very much my thing. I'm very into it. I'm really glad you appreciated it and that it felt real. That means a lot.
I want to add something really quickly. You've asked us about the process and how we thought of making this a unique format, and I realized there's one aspect we didn't cover, which I think is very important, and that was Analee's decision to reach out to people who had already written stuff that was relevant, who had already done anthologies that were relevant, and make them part of the anthology as well. So from the editors of Octavia's Brood anthology. The interview we had with them, but also the reprints that we got from people like Ursula Vernon and N.K. Jemisin and so forth that were already, and Nicola Griffith, that were already so impactful. And in a way, they're like beads strung through, kind of connecting the stories and making the stories more impactful because you immediately understand the filter or the lens or whatever that's being used. So I think that has really added a lot as well. Oh, and I also wanted to say that, so Malka wrote an original story, Analee wrote an original story. I did not. When Analee invited me and said, oh, I'd love you to be a co-editor and also to write something, I was like, I've already written something that would work. Can we just use that? And I actually co-wrote it with Tobias Bukel, so I need to give him credit for that. But I wanted to mention it because I'm from Barbados, and it is my story of Calypsonians in space, because Calypso has always been protest music. It's always been something that's been very deep in our tradition. And it's called A Mighty Slinger. So that's where that kind of fits into the whole thing. But that's a 10-year-old, or more than 10-year-old story, and still relevant in many ways. And that's what we kept finding, going back to the past, whether it was someone talking about their activism in earlier years, or whether it was a reprinted essay, or whether it was a reprinted story. They're just themes and processes and expectations that keep kind of cycling back and get again and again and again.
That was actually one of the most powerful things for me about our conference, was because, I mean, we're obviously in a really tough time right now since 2022 and going on. And so to have these really veteran activists who are able to say to us, yeah, we've been through tough times before. And yeah, sometimes it looks really bad. And sometimes the thing doesn't work the way you want it to work. And we keep going, and then we get somewhere. It meant a lot at the time. It means a lot now to think about that. And so, yeah, that's something else that definitely the process of editing this book brought to me, and that I hope we transfer through the book, because it's really needed right now.
Yeah, that was, one of the things that was so fun about doing this book, or maybe fun isn't the right word, but like nourishing, is that we did find that these themes ran through the stories. One of them absolutely was, you have to keep going in the face of defeat. And defeat isn't always defeat. Like, it feels like defeat in the moment, but it might actually be the first chip off the block, right? And so there were several other themes that kept cropping up. And Karen, I know you kind of kept track of some of the themes. What were some of the other themes that were super interesting?
I'll just mention what come to mind. The exhaustion of war. The exhaustion of war was definitely in there. We have a couple of stories, one with the backdrop of Palestine, one of the backdrop of kind of a quasi-Ukraine and so forth. And
oh my God, that story made me cry. Like,
it's such an amazing story.
Just incredible.
Yeah, so that one was definitely in there. And then there was also, I would say, the idea that even the things that we think of as trivial, like sports and tourism, are not as straightforward as we think. That there's still, even if you're just enjoying yourself or you're just having fun, there's still some element in there of either colonialism or imperialism or politics or whatever that you have to reckon with. And then the other thing that I appreciated is, I don't know why, but I kept seeing a kind of there was always a theme of renewal happening in the stories, or renewal or transformation, whether it was talking about seeds growing, whether it was talking about, I have to use that excellent term, unbittering yourself, kind of, re-knitting yourself so that you kind of knit the bitterness out of you. The renewal was something that I found especially amazing, that just kept coming up again and again in these stories.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to ask you all about the title of the book, We Will Rise Again. That, like, speaking of the renewal, and, you know, I certainly think a lot about, and we've had a number of conversations on this pod about the sort of role of grief and grief work as part of the work of movement building, that, like, often what brings us to these kinds of struggles is losing something that we can't return to, whether that's the loss of a person, a loss of a place, a loss of power. I feel like that emotional landscape is present in a lot of these stories, whether it's like characters losing people they love, relationships they love. And where did the title of the book come from? And could you talk a little bit to, I guess, that emotional landscape a little bit more?
I think I had the title, like that was one of the first things. I love coming up with titles. So I used to edit a blog where I just like wrote a billion headlines for things. So it comes from science fiction, obviously. And it also comes from like the kind of campy history of comic books where you always have like someone saying like, we will rise again, you know, and sometimes it's the bad guy. In fact, it's often the bad guy. But of course, often in those stories, the people who are portrayed as bad guys are actually our allies. You know, it'll be like, oh, the person who has been marginalized by like some like white guy who runs a bunch of factories and has a bunch of cool tech. And it's somebody who lives on an island nation who, you know, is being targeted by the so-called hero. So I was thinking about it like that, like, you know, kind of turning that trope on its head. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so Boots Riley is kind of one of the muses of our area, and he's done a lot of films and TV where he kind of thinks through what does it mean to be a hero, and that's a very kind of Boots Riley tip of the hat, I think, this title, and so we wanted to capture that sense of both fun. Like kind of referring to the history of sci-fi and comics, but also making it very serious. Like you were saying, like to think about how mourning is built into the process of revolution and resistance, but also how rage is built into it as well. There's a kind of anger and joy and silliness in this book that all gets squished up together. And, you know, some stories are more angry than others. Some are more silly than others. And when I say silly, I mean serious silliness, you know, the kind of silliness that you have at a protest where you're like doing something goofy, like dressing up, say, in a inflatable dinosaur suit, but you're doing it for extremely serious reasons.
I just also am interested in this because I feel like fiction is this place where we can play with feelings that might otherwise also be scary, but that are necessary for us to rehearse in order to go to the place that we need to go, you know?
I think that's really true. And I think, one thing that we did think about a lot with this book was the balance of emotional modes, shall we say, of the stories and the sort of order that we wanted them to be in. And, you know, we have a lot of stories that are hopeful. We have some that are kind of funny and frothy and feel good. And then we have some that will make you cry. I mean, we all cried quite a bit, I think, in the editing. But, you know, often in a really, really good way. And as you say, you know, gosh, like, I think that there is that catharsis element. And I think that there is the element too of us knowing that, you know, all of these stories are stories that are happening around us right now. And so there are times when it's not just easier, but the fact that we can read a short story about something and deal with it on that level helps us then to process this reality that we're living in.
Obviously, in addition to the way that things feel, the other question that all storytelling really deals with on some level is the question of power. What were some of the conversations that you all had about how power shows up in these stories? And how do you think speculative fiction can give us new vantage points on the way that power is created, distributed, and used?
So, you know, power, I would say, is one of these massive themes in science fiction that I think we're wrestling with, not just in the anthology, but in all of the books that we write as individual authors as well. It's a very juicy, complicated, nuanced topic. And the power held by individuals is, of course, not the same as the power held in a systemic way. So, I would say that in some ways, what I think challenges some readers is trying to figure out which side of the power barrier they're on, because you can have little power in your own life and yet still be part of a system that's powerful and be oppressing others, for example.
Right.
That's a classic example. And you can also, some people, we talked about, you talked about the grieving process, losing something. Some people are so comfortable where they are that even if they could choose to walk away from something that they know is oppressive, they could choose to find other modes of power. The work of doing that, the loss it would require, the hard work and the adjustments it require are something they're not yet willing to do. So I think that if there's anything that maybe does come out in this anthology, I hope, is that it's looking at where is your relationship with power? Where is your relationship with power, and what can you do, and how do you deal with things you can't do? Sometimes we're like, oh, well, it's too big for me and I can't, there's nothing I can do, there's nothing I can say, whatever. I recognize, for example, that I'm not going to be on the streets protesting because I am a small person who does not like to be in a crush. But I'm a writer and I'm an editor, and this is my way of protest. This is my way of contributing. So we all just sort of have to find where our power is and wield it as efficiently and as ethically as we can.
That's so well said. This is why I love working with Karen and Malka. All I was going to add to that is just that I do think that going back to the themes of the book, I think there is a theme of people finding power through community. And again, this goes against a very dominant idea in fantasy and science fiction that like there has to be this rugged chosen one, or not even rugged, but like just a chosen one who's like the guy. Usually it's a guy who's going to save everybody. And all of these stories are like, fuck that. Like we're going to find a community, and through community, we will find power.
I would just say too that the other thing that I think fiction can be really useful for, and that I hope we do in lots of different ways in the book, is that because it lets you identify with someone who is different from you, that can help with, as Karen said, like situating yourself in power. One of my favorite examples of this is Jessamine Ward's Savage the Bones. If you know it, it's a bit old now, but I mean, she's amazing. And it's this book where, you're in this character and you don't know that much about her. And as you start to learn more, it becomes a character that I think a lot of people would have opinions about if they were just faced with like, here's the description. But because you identified, the writing is amazing and the story is interesting and you identify so much that I can imagine it taking people by surprise. Actually, I think Le Guin said stuff about that, about Earthsea as well, and building the character so that people would identify and then putting different things about him in. And so, I think for us it was part of the reason we really wanted to have a wide range of authors from different countries and different backgrounds. But also I think you see, in the stories that we are putting the reader in a lot of different situations, and hopefully some of the ones that resonate because they're familiar with them, and hopefully some of the ones will take them out of their comfort zone.
And I just want to kind of add to that. Something I'm finding very fascinating is that the unorthodox format, I think I mentioned before that it's helping some readers because it helps contextualize the stories. And yes, we're all primarily speculative fiction authors, and also in some cases academics in nonfiction, journalism, and so forth. But when a person who's not usually a science fiction reader comes to this anthology, sometimes I wonder what they might get out of it, because, obviously when you're targeting your audience to the science fiction audience, there's certain tropes you can play with, there's certain things you can, kind of subvert or whatever, and they know the language you're talking. And I've been just paying attention to some of the reactions and some of the reviews. And I think people who are not really into science fiction are really, really enjoying the nonfiction bits a lot. And because of that, are willing to dip a little more into the stories that they might not have ordinarily wanted to dip into. Because, there's some people who are very averse to non-real world stories for a given value in the real world. But now they have this sort of essay or interview that sort of gives them a gateway. They're like, oh, okay, let me see what this has to say about what this person said in the real world. And then they have context for it as well. And it's really kind of working for some people. And that actually gets me very excited, because I am a broad church when it comes to genre, and I think more people should be. So anything that encourages people to look at the amazing things that science speculative fiction stories can do, and also to look more deeply at the speculative fiction that they do already love and see where the grounded context comes from. That kind of growth in both directions is something I'm very excited to see.
Yeah, that's really cool. I had not thought about that as like one of the side effects of having this sort of like a multi-genre anthology, but that makes a lot of sense. Some people are too stuck in being like, I have to be serious. It's like, no, it's actually all very serious. And I know at the top of the interview, you were like, oh, we're not going to say like as though they are our favorites, but I'm curious if there are like specific contributions you do want to lift up for our listeners as sort of like, here's some teasers, like here's what this is about and why this really spoke to me. If there's like stuff that you're like, oh, people should pick this up for this reason. Yeah, I'm curious.
I've already dropped a few hints. Calypsonians in space, literal knitting that makes you less bitter. Goodness, what was that? The therapeutic gardening, both the nonfiction kind and the fictional kind.
Yeah.
And for those who love poetry, we actually do have a story that unexpectedly gave us some amazing poetry. And I was just like blown away. These are things that you don't say to people, do this or don't do this, but then they just present it to you. And just as a last comment, we got a story late where the person said, oh, I'm so sorry, this is so late. I hope it can still be used. And it was a story that completely blew us away. We were like, well, yes, of course we can use this. Thank you very much. That was the one where memory meets the sea. And I think that's one that's actually available online. Maybe we can send a link to you later on. But for those who want a taster, it's at Electric Lit. And it's really quite a stunning story.
We also have a lot of pieces in this book that are very pointedly satirical, which I really enjoy. We have one that's about anti-trans laws where people protest them by dressing up in 18th century clothing and going out into the street and having a protest about clothing laws. Because, of course, in the 18th century, the gender of your clothes was completely different than it is now, or like the presentation was very different. And we have a great story about Palestine, which is extremely satirical, written by a guy who mostly is an academic who studies food and who studies chai. And he just wrote this great piece that wound up being really prescient. Like it has only become more relevant as time has gone on, but it's about an AI robot that's a Zionist and kind of what that happens to that robot over time as Palestine is returned to the people who lived there originally. So that's pretty cool. So I think it is like all about this sort of balance of like some stories are using satire, some stories are using deep emotional connection with you to kind of make you feel sad, but also hopeful. There's also a story about combating government corruption by unleashing an army of harpies in a government building in Malaysia, which is actually based on a real movement against corruption, but
not the harpies. The
harpies are not based in real, but there is a real movement.
We just want to clarify that.
But that's one of the awesome things about this book is that you do get all these like sort of possibilities in your head, and you're like, well, why don't we have harpies? And it's like, okay, we can't have those, but we could have something like that.
Yeah, what actually exists that could fill this role?
Yeah,
they're out there.
Yeah, like little drones, crickets. I think
it was crickets. This actually this was in one of the interviews too, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was an actual protest that L.A. Kaufman told us about being involved in.
So good.
Yeah, I want Malka to say what she's excited about in the anthology.
I obviously agree with everything everyone said. Where Memory Meets the Sea was really impactful for me, especially as the daughter of someone who is in exile, also from an island. And we mentioned before Other Wars Elsewhere, which is just so amazing. And like,
That's the knitting one.
it's the knitting one, and it's also, well, we talked about it a little bit, but anyway, just fantastic. Really, using fantasy as a way to get out of things and look at them differently, and getting at some of those emotional beats. Certainly Persephone in the City, which is amazing.
Poetry on that one.
Poetry. And also, we haven't mentioned The Rise and Fall of Storm Bluff. I thought that one was great. Really, really powerful. And another one we haven't talked about yet is What Does Joy Look Like? Which I thought was one of the ones that got at a hopeful, in some ways hopeful, but also with the loss, and just also written in a very interesting, formally interesting way. So that's another one I like. But they're all good.
My story is about the extremely yeah, they are all good. My story is about content moderation online, which is like a topic that everyone finds incredibly boring. So I was like, at last I have written an exciting story about content moderation. So it's pretty exciting.
No, it's really great. And I when you said earlier there was something for everyone here, I think that's quite right. That there's like the tonal variation, the sort of setting variation, and the variation in like who we're hearing from is really awesome. It was absolutely a pleasure to read, and I'm glad you all could come here and talk about it. Are there other things that you all are planning around the book? Are there other sort of like follow-ups that you have in the works?
We have a virtual event coming up in January at City Lights Books in San Francisco. And we're also going to be in Europe in the spring doing a couple of events. Yeah, we're very excited. So
I need to just clarify quickly. When you said, do we have anything planned as a follow-up, did you mean in terms of events directly connected to the anthology, or did you mean like a part 2?
Oh yeah, I was just assuming events. Yeah, sorry about that.
I mean, definitely you are in the timeline of events, but yeah, I'm also curious if you've gotten any feedback that is like motivating, exciting, like sparking some new ideas.
A lot of feedback that is like very powerful for us to hear that this was something that people needed. That's been amazing. I don't know if we're at a place yet to think about a follow-up exactly, but when we had this idea, one of the first things that we thought about was the Octavia's Brood anthology, which also explicitly connects science fiction to activism. And so we talked to Walida Marisha and Adrienne Marie Brown about that to make sure that they knew we were doing this in full knowledge and homage of what they accomplished. And they, did this interview with us, which was also one of these where we were like, we kind of said to them, we know you're very busy. You don't have to write something. We'll do an interview and just transcribe it. And the interview was like amazing. Like we all came out of it feeling like they're so good.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that we were able to publish that. But, I think we hope too that there will be more, that other people will in the future say, okay, we have a different angle on this and we have a different take on this, or we're going to do this, with a focus on a certain issue or a certain part of the world, and that would be awesome. Like, I hope we're inspiring people to do the same. And
that's the best answer. Passing the baton answer.
I do love working with you too, though. So whatever comes up.
Yeah.
No, I think that's our fondest hope, is it goes into the world and gets used in classrooms and gets used in like community organizing to help people think about what they would like to see if they could just let their imagination roam.
I want book clubs to really seize on it and to like go. It's an anthology to be savored. I really don't think you should rush through it. I really think that if you wanted to, you could just like say, we're going to do like a 6-week book club around this or whatever, and just like select certain things, have groups discuss it, people go away do research and come back and talk about it or talk about their own personal experience in terms of that. It's really meant to stimulate discussion is what I would say. So we want it to be in as many spaces, whether academic or non-academic, where it can be doing that to its fullest.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to chew on here for sure. And I don't know, one of the things that popped into my head was also thinking about the reprints and talking with Adrian and Walida about previous work, that like one of the things that my partner and I talk about all the time is that citation is praxis, and that being able to like point at a lineage is actually something that is like also, I think, deeply a part of a lot of movement culture that I've come out of, that like that's an important, like identifying your lineage is really important, and like
yes,
it's really cool that you've integrated that practice into the actual editing of this book. So
much of this is, we're talking about generational projects, really.
Yeah,
we're talking about that kind of timeline. We're talking about that kind of, I mean, literally when we said things like handing on the baton and so forth. So if people begin to sort of just absorb that concept into their bones, into the marrow, then I think that would be the anthology accomplishing its purpose.
I'm going to ask each of you where we can find you on the internet if people are interested in seeing more of your individual work. And we will obviously link to the book in the show notes for listeners who are interested. But Malka, where can people find you online if they want to see more of your work?
Well, in terms of social media, I'm mostly on Blue Sky these days. I do have like a website that is very poorly curated and kept up to date, and other social media accounts. You can find me pretty easily by my first name and last name because I'm rare. But also, I have a recent podcast that came out from the Issues in Science and Technology journal. The podcast is called Not Now, But Soon, and it's about disasters of various kinds. And so you can look that up under their podcast series, The Ongoing Transformation. You can also find me at Global Voices, where I put out a weekly newsletter curating our stories for the week.
Awesome. Analee, where can people find you online if they want to see more of yours?
Similarly, I am on Blue Sky and Mastodon. I'm Analee in all of those places. I also have a website you can find just by searching on my name. It's pretty up to date, not super up to date. And I have a monthly column in New Scientist, which is free as long as you are willing to create a free account on New Scientist. So there's that. And then also, I just finished up a 7-year run doing a podcast, which I co-hosted with Charlie Jane Anders, called Our Opinions Are Correct. So if you really need 7 years worth of discussions of science fiction and society and politics, it's actually pretty evergreen. We had a lot of great guests, and it's really a fun listen.
Awesome. And Karen, where can people find you online?
Well, KarenLord.wordpress.com. I think I have that right. If I haven't, please correct me. And it's reasonably up to date. I did, in fact, go and clean it up a little bit. All my books are there. My anthologies are there. I did, in fact, have a podcast years ago with Karen Burnham, which does talk about, again, science fiction and so forth. Locus magazine hosts it now. Thanks very much for them giving us that space. The original place was hosted, eventually closed down. And on social media, Dr. Karen Lord, that is DrKarenLord, on Blue Sky, and also on Instagram. I'm not really active anywhere else, and I'm really kind of semi-active. I do a lot of reposting, but at least the Instagram, if I go somewhere cool, then I will end up like posting pretty pictures of here's this literary festival I'm at or whatever. So that's what makes that one worthwhile.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, all three of you, for making the time to talk about the book and your work. And it's just a delight to read and a delight to learn more.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Really great questions, and we realize that you read the book.
Awesome. Yes.
My thanks again to Karen, Analee, and Malka for joining me this week. We'll have links to find the book and all of their other work in the show notes. This show is published by Convergence, a magazine for radical insights. I'm Kaden Mock, and our producer is Josh Elstrom. Editorial assistance provided this week by Akin Allah, and Kimmy David designed our cover art. Convergence Magazine is a proud founding member of the Movement Media Alliance. I also wanted to let you know that we are running an end-of-year fundraising drive to raise money for a new program that we're going to be running in 2026, the Elbaum Resident Writers. This is an opportunity to support emerging voices from movement writers who are just starting to develop their practice. And if you think our movements could use more clear, confident public thinkers, please join us. The link to give will be in the show notes. Happy New Year, and I hope this helps.